Greetings, everyone. This is David Moore, General Manager of PEP Radio. I'm also the past president of the Pennsylvania Equality Project and a current board member. In response to Pennsylvania Senate Bill 9 from Judy Ward, Senator from Pennsylvania, I would like to share at this time the opposition that we wrote to the Pennsylvania Senate regarding Senate Bill 9. Now, first, before I get into our explanation as to why we oppose the bill, I'm going to read the memo from Senator Judy Ward to her colleagues, encouraging them to join her as co-sponsors with this piece of legislation. To ensure that female students compete in high school and college sports on a level playing field, we are introducing the Save Women's Sports Act, which was Senate Bill 1191 of the 2021-2022 legislative session. This bill will preserve the increased athletic opportunities that female students have gained over the past half century in this country. Under this legislation, school athletic teams designated for women may not be open to those of the male sex. The legislation defines sex as the biological distinction between male and female based on reproductive biology and genetic makeup. It's imperative that we protect the opportunity for female athletes to compete on the athletic field in a fair and equal manner. Allowing a biological male to compete on a women's scholastic athletic team puts all women on the playing field at an automatic disadvantage. Maintaining separate biologically specific teams will ensure opportunities for women athletes while fulfilling the goals of Title IX. Title IX was designed to end discrimination and create equal athletic opportunities for women. Allowing biological males to compete in women's sports threatens to undo the progress we've witnessed since the enactment of Title IX. Athletic competitions give women the opportunity to demonstrate their strength and skill while also providing for recognition ranging from accolades to college scholarships. By opening women's sports to include males, we take away those opportunities for our women and girls who have worked tirelessly to achieve the equality they deserve. Again, these paragraphs are taken from Senator Judy Ward's co-sponsorship memo sent to her Pennsylvania Senate colleagues to encourage their support for Pennsylvania Senate Bill 9 that would, quote, protect girls and women, end quote, in sports. While we do believe in fairness and equality, what the bill lacks is any sense of equity for student athletes whose gender does not match their bodily anatomy. It also ignores both the intersex community and does not adequately define sex. Rather, the bill attempts to pigeonhole all people into two sexes, an idea which medical science does not endorse. Thus, with due respect to Senator Ward and her colleagues, we respectfully oppose the passage of this bill. What follows is the rationale we apply to the definitions provided by the text of the bill, the realities from medical science, and the likelihood that students will inevitably face discrimination with the bill's passage. The term sex is defined as immutable, which certainly applies to one's skin color, one's ethnicity, one's sexual orientation. But one's sex or gender is not as unchangeable as this legislation concludes. Chromosomal designations of X and Y occur in a multitude of possible combinations. The two most common variations are XX chromosomes, which represent a woman, and XY chromosomes, which represents a man. However, some men are born with an extra X chromosome and thus have XXY characteristics. Some women lack two X chromosomes and instead have an XO chromosomal pattern, which indicates that one chromosome is either missing or not fully formed. The umbrella term intersex is used to describe people who have chromosomal and sex characteristics that fall outside of the gender binary. Shortly after birth, either the parents or a surgeon make the decision as to which sex the newborn infant should be. As a result, intersex people often undergo additional surgery to give the appearance that the child's genitalia fit neatly into the male-female binary. However, The surgeon's scalpel cannot address the interests or genitalia determination of all intersex people. Among the ailments which are classified as part of the intersex community are Klinefelter syndrome, XXY chromosomal pattern, which impacts roughly 1 in about 500 to 1,000 males per year. Among the various differences between people with Klinefelter syndrome and those who don't have it are delayed or incomplete puberty, reduced facial or body hair, breast enlargement, otherwise known as gynecomastia, learning disabilities, delayed speech and language development, and reduced fertility or even infertility. Turner syndrome, better known as XO chromosome, which impacts 1 out of every 2,500 female live births worldwide. These folks have wide or web-like neck, low-set ears, broad chest with widely spaced nipples, a high, narrow roof of the mouth, or the palate, arms that turn outward at the elbows, swelling of the hands and feet, especially at birth, slightly smaller than average height at birth, fingernails and toenails that are narrow and turned upward. And then there's Swyer syndrome, XY gonadal dysgenesis, which impacts approximately 1 in 80,000 births per year nationwide. There are a variety of symptoms that explain what Swyer syndrome is. Same with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which impacts roughly 1 in 10,000 to 18,000 children per year. These children are born with not enough cortisol. They have an adrenal crisis. Their external genitals don't look typical. Male infants with congenital adrenal hyperplasia often have genitals that look typical, but sometimes are enlarged. Maybe they have too much androgen. Maybe extra androgen hormones in females may lead to facial hair, more body hair than usual, and a deeper voice. Maybe they have altered growth. As children, they grow up very quickly. They're taller than usual for their age, but their final height might actually be shorter than average. And these folks often face additional difficulties later in life. As this is only a partial list of conditions that cause varied changes during pubescence and post-pubescence, student athletes could face numerous challenges from opposing teams and coaches who lack the medical training necessary to speak with any credibility on the matter. Each of these conditions can be diagnosed only after extensive testing and consultation with a qualified physician, and often do not show as issues until a child completes puberty. As a result, students in grades K through 8 who have these conditions will likely face unnecessary discrimination because of this proposed legislation. Why should students with any of these conditions face discrimination in school settings? As a hypothetical case scenario, to use the language of the bill, if a girl student basketball player has altered growth and is taller than her peers, should she face challenges from an opposing team player or coach simply because she is taller than the other players? As a secondary hypothetical, if a cisgender girl were to be falsely accused of being a boy due to excessive androgen hormonal levels, should her family be forced to pay the legal and medical expenses for said false claim? Should she be ostracized by her own friends and teammates for a condition that is immutable? Section 3B of the bill says that athletic teams or sports designated for females, women, or girls under subsection A2 may not be open to students of the male sex. The definition in the bill is comparable to that of Senate Bill 456, passed by the West Virginia legislature and signed by Governor Patrick Morrisey. The original bill contained language specifying that the youth's care provider had to be the person to determine the child's sex at birth. However, the language was removed before the bill was passed, forcing parents to provide a copy of the child's birth certificate indicating the child's sex. The proposed Pennsylvania legislation does not indicate how a parent or college-age student is supposed to prove the individual's sex. Under current Pennsylvania law, a gender designation of X is legal on both a birth certificate and a driver's license. How will the PIAA or other governing sports body determine the student athlete's sex? If a student athlete is accused of not being female, Who makes the final determination of the student's sex? Who is the final arbiter of such a decision? According to the Parkersburg News and Sentinel, the Riley-Gaines Act, or West Virginia Senate Bill 456, defines the terms sex, male, and female in state code, basing those definitions on biological sex at birth. The bill further states that males and females are legally equal, but they are not biologically the same, possess unique and immutable biological differences that manifest prior to birth, and are not similarly situated in all circumstances and are not interchangeable. Despite the claims that sexual characteristics are immutable, the aforementioned intersex clinical diagnostic symptoms show that some of the tools used to determine a child's sex are not readily visible until puberty or post-puberty. Thus, how unchanging are the characteristics used to determine whether students are playing on the correct team? The question posed toward the West Virginia legislature applies to the proposed legislation here in Pennsylvania and its co-sponsors. While intersex student athletes are one concern, another is how to determine the sex of students who are transgender. Despite executive orders from the White House, transgender people exist. The standards of care established by the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, which are also accepted by the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, recommend continued care and careful assessment of cognitive maturity by qualified mental health professionals. Additionally, Chapter 12 and 13 and Appendix D contain further recommendations regarding hormone therapy and surgical treatments in adolescents. The primary form of care for transgender individuals is to provide psychological counseling and hormonal therapy to avert puberty, to avoid ongoing hormonal growth and development in ways that may not match the youth's gender identity. As a result, students who are transgender are often undergoing hormonal changes that require consistent monitoring by the youth's physician and healthcare providing team. Although their physical, sexual anatomy may not match their gender identity, in time, it will. If students who are intersex do not have immutable sex definitions, again, as shown vis-a-vis the previous diagnostic symptoms, why should transgender youth and young adults? Furthermore, why should students who are transgender face limitations to their potential athletic careers simply because opposing teams and coaches may disagree with competing against a student who happens to be transgender? We conclude our position statement with the following hypothetical condition. According to the PIAA handbook, girls are allowed to compete on boys' teams, sports teams, that is. For example, a girl who may very well be intersex or transgender would be permitted to try out for the team and compete against opposing schools as a kicker, punter, or any other position the coach allows. Again, using the language of the proposed legislation, why should a girl be allowed to compete on a boys' team, but a boy, as determined by birth certificate, is prevented from competing on a girls' sports team, even though the child may have one of the previously mentioned conditions? To address the concern of potential for physical injury to a girl or woman competing against an intersex or transgender girl, perhaps the first concern should be to remove the potential for girls to compete in boys' or men's athletics. For the above stated reasons and for everything we've talked about thus far, we oppose Pennsylvania Senate Bill 9 and the concepts upon which it relies. Now, as for how this fits in with this particular program right now, we are going to take a very short break, and when we come back, we're going to turn to Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, who has more details on this very topic. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.